Hey everybody, welcome to Geeksvana Live. I hope you're all extremely well on this fairly sunny evening here in the UK. I've got a bizarre thing where I have to tell you the weather at the start of live streams, but hey, perhaps I'll change one day, but there you go. So tonight it is a Q&A. It is a question and answer session where myself and Graham are going to be looking through some of the questions which have been sent in by you, either via email, through direct message, or comments you've left on previous videos, and trying to give you some of the answers that we believe are the facts behind those questions, basically, and try and help you out with all of your drone flying fun. If you've got a question as well tonight, those of you that have kindly joined us tonight in the live chat, then you can tag at Geeksvana and we'll get round to your questions too. Yeah, hopefully pass on some information that might be of use to you all, basically, which will be rather helpful. So again, tag at Geeksvana. And as somebody in the chat has already said this evening, do remember to get those likes in nice and early. It helps the algorithm to recommend this stream out and to recommend out the channel as well. And also a shout out to Pete Has Flies. Why would it be files, Sean? Pete Has Flies. Good evening, all. I have finally caught the beginning of the show after a couple of years. Well, welcome, Pete. It's really good to see you. Now, in the live chat as well, you'll also see Graham's in there as up. Producer Will is joining us tonight as well, and he's in the live chat to help you. And also we have Chris Lawrence, one of our moderators, who is an air traffic controller, so an expert in that field. So if you see Chris saying something in there as well, then you can see it. So yes, so there we go. Without further ado, I will bring in the co-host and the producer, because of course Will comes in via voice, as a mystical voice from the ether. But Graham, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And for anybody who thinks or thought I was going to be coming from the shower, it's not the shower. It is my bedroom, but it's in a very nice building, far nicer than my
You're on holiday this week, aren't you?
I'm on holiday, so I'm working literally from a suitcase. So you'll find me looking down a lot more than usual as I look.
Indeed, but you are so committed to giving people their answers to their Q&As.
Setup, but yeah, happy
you're so committed that you'll even do it on holiday, which is fantastic. So thank you very much. And producer Will, you're there in the background as well.
Oh yes, yeah. Who knows? Maybe one day you could do the million subscriber face reveal. Now
yeah, if this channel ever gets to 1 million subscribers, it won't be my face that will be on it. So I'm sure we would have replaced the presenters by then. But yeah, so we're going to be getting into the nitty gritty of your questions and answers today. I'm really looking forward to this one. We get a lot of emails, we get a lot of DMs, etc. And this has been a really helpful way for us to get some of those answers out to people. If you do send us an email, if you do comment, I do also, after the show, reply to that email or comment with the answers that we're giving here. So we're going to start off actually with one from the chat, which is an interesting one, because it sort of has different connotations to it. This one's from one of our regular viewers, Lindsay Hayes. Hi, Lindsay, good to see you. And he says, question: what are the rules for automated flight, e.g. waypoints, mapping, follow me, and dronies, etc.? Now, this is one that myself and Graham actually discuss a reasonable amount, not because we're confused over it, etc., but actually because it is one of the general areas, the general topics that can cause us a little bit of frustration sometimes, shall we say, from the point of view of how we see the other operators, especially here in the UK, flying their drones. Because of course, when you have things like somebody flying a drone and it's on follow me mode and they're driving a car, then there's a potentially significant issue there. Really, the overall answer to that question is actually fairly simple. The flight itself needs to be legal. So you need to be at the controls of the drone. You need to be have the drone within line of sight, and all of the other things. It needs to be a safe flight, etc., etc., etc. Really, it doesn't matter if the flight that's happening in front of you is automated or not. It really just needs to be a safe flight that's actually following the basic rules, basically. But certainly, can I say basically one more time? Basically. But certainly, it's one of those things where the side of it that we see frustrating is that sometimes people will put something into a waypoint mission that's 3 miles away, or as I say, they'll put follow me mode on their car and drive off in their car with it following them, which I think, Graham, is one of the areas that we get quite frustrated about, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of my bugbears. I mean, that there is. Don't ask me to quote which section it is, but part of the implementing regulation essentially says that you have to be in control of the drone, and the acceptable means of compliance means you can't be in charge of another piece of machinery, be that a bicycle or a car or motorbike or whatever. So, and people say, well, what's the point of follow me? Well, the point is that you can be walking, you can have somebody else in a car, you can be operating the drone to follow somebody else, because they might be doing that, but it's essentially you have to be in control of the drone. And my real concern, and it is a very real concern, is that the first accident, the first death we will get from drones will be possibly from a sub 250 drone, which we all know are perfectly safe, but it will be related to the drone because the car will hit somebody because the driver is concentrating on driving and the drone, and they will get something wrong and they will hit somebody. And that's my real concern, and I believe that is a concern of the police as well. So, you do these things at your own risk, and
it's something where you feel you're concerned that actually it's not the drone flight directly, obviously the little 250-gram drone itself that's going to cause the damage, but actually the distracted pilot that's then going to do something with their vehicle, that type of thing.
Absolutely. I think that's where the real risk is. It's the ton and a half of metal, not the 250-gram drone necessarily. But I think in general, the ones to watch are visual line of sight, because you can plan it sat at your desks, potentially if it's you using Litchi or Lychee. So you can plan these things remotely and then go and fly. So you need to ensure that it is going to remain within visual line of sight. And therefore you can take control of it. If there's a problem, you'll know if there's a problem. Look out for heights of trees and other obstructions that won't necessarily be clear on a map how high they are, but all of a sudden, you're surrounded by them. Drone goes up, goes behind a tree, you can't see it anymore, return to home. You essentially lost control of the drone temporarily. So you
need to be able to take control of the drone at any point during the flight. So if it's an automated flight, then actually taking control of it again, you therefore need to make sure that it's under 400 feet within line of sight and all the other usual stipulations, etc. And things like if it's a heavier drone, not flying over people, etc. And all of the separations in congested areas, everything still counts. The fact that it's automated does not remove any of the legalities, any of the regulations or onus on the drone pilot whatsoever. It's all still very much down to you. So hopefully that's a simple answer, but it's the first of, I'm sure, will be many opportunities for us to raise that particular frustration that myself and Graham share regarding automated flights. Will, do you have the next question?
Yeah, I mean, we had so many in over the past couple weeks. We've got comments, emails. We'll start with this one from Lee, saying, "Hi, Sean. Want to say thanks for all the great drone content you and your team are putting out there on the YouTube. Thank you very much, Lee. Would it be possible if you could do another video on Article 16? I'm a member of FPV UK and flying M3C, but don't fully understand the rules or if it's even still valid. Also, if Article 16 is as good as it sounds, why is it not more out there?"
Excellent. And we also had Drone View, who was asking us to talk about Article 16 authorization in the live chat as well. So it's answering two with one, as it were. Article 16 is superb, and it's something which was hard fought by FPV UK, Simon Dale and others, but Simon had a particular hand in gaining this. Now, the way to look at it, and what you have to understand about really in a very basic, in the basic format, is that this is actually an operational authorization. So in the same way that you pass your GVC test and then you then apply to the CAA for what's called an operational authorization, which then allows you to fly heavier drones in congested areas and that type of thing to those stipulations. That is essentially what this is. It is an operational authorization granted to certain organizations like FPV UK, BMFA. I think they're actually also started to separate off a little bit more recently. I think the revised ones actually have, the different clubs even have very specific ones for them, rather than it being a generic one open to all of them. I think the Scottish group don't have theirs available anymore, but I'm not sure on that. So essentially what it gives you is, if you are a member of one of those organizations, you can basically fly your drone within 30 meters of uninvolved people, including in congested areas. That can go down to 15 meters for takeoff and landing if you take certain mitigation into place. So if you have someone else there to make sure it's safe and as a spotter or that type of thing. But there's a there are two very important points with Article 16, which is why I think they're not as widely it's not as widely used as perhaps it could be, and where it differentiates from things like an A2 CFC, etc. The first one is that it can only be used in areas which are predominantly used for leisure. So places like parks, beaches, and those kind of things. That's a very important one to remember. So just because you're under the Article 16 doesn't mean you can take off from the side of a road, from the middle of a town, that type of thing. Very important to remember. The second part of it is that you can also only operate in the volume of the airspace that you're within. So if you take off from a park, which is in a congested area, which the Article 16 allows you to do, you can't then take off and fly over the houses next door into the congested area. It's something which basically you have to imagine like a little, essentially a wall around that park, a wall around that beach, etc. And unless the beach, of course, is in A3, then you're absolutely fine. But if you're in a congested area in particular, you must keep it to the volume. So I think that kind of restriction is really where it sort of stops people from using it in a more wider aspect. And also the design of it for things like FPV UK was to ensure that people can still enjoy the FPV hobby in parks and that type of thing in a potentially safe manner. Would you say that covers it off fairly succinctly, Graham?
I think so. I've got to say I was distracted. I was just answering something in the chat. So have you've covered the commercial?
Yes, indeed. It is for, as you would expect with something for FPV UK and BMFA. It is absolutely only for recreational use. You cannot do any kind of commercial flying with it whatsoever. But it does have its limitations, and it's just worth keeping. I see again on a lot of groups where people say, okay, I've got the A2 CFC and the Article 16, and actually the Article 16 is better because I can, it has shorter distances. Yes, but only to fly in those leisure areas. Basically, you can't just, I'm in a congested area where I am right now. I couldn't walk out the front here and take off from the side of the road. Arguably, you could do that with A2 CFC actually, with the separations and the way that all of that works. But anyway, that's a whole other argument. But that really is the sort of the whistle stop tour of Article 16. In any case, we will.
It's for courses, and also I don't think it's seen the same amount of advertising. Essentially, there's two entities advertising it, which would be BMFA and FPV UK. Whereas for A2 CFC, you've got all of the RAEs have been advertising that.
Yeah, exactly. But it is also, it is still quite a niche thing. Basically, it is still quite a niche thing to have. So another question from the chat here, Steel City drone pilot Paul, good to see you, sir. Hope you're well. I have a friend who does FPV. Is that friend you, Paul? He has been asked to fly FPV at a festival with 2,000 people. He wants to know what he needs to overfly the crowds. No A2 or GVC, no brainer. Yeah, indeed. What he needs to overfly the crowds is he basically needs a whole list of things, a whole litany, a whole list of things. Yes, if it's in the UK particularly. And actually also not just down to the regulations, the drone regulation side of things, because there's going to be a whole raft of health and safety side of things and insurance side of things that they're going to need to cover for the festival from the commercial side. We are talking about a highly specialized commercial operation with that particular type of you would need your GVC, an operational authorization, and on top of that you will need an operating safety case, an OSC.
Even then, Sean, I mean, I talk with an awful lot of OSC holders, and they talk with the CAA, and they're interested in this sort of thing, and they're very experienced. And essentially, the CAA are saying no, you will not fly over
Absolutely. GVC OSC, which, by the way, by the time you've gone through there, you've spent an awful lot of money, and gaining an OSC is not a simple thing. Hence why people like Graham are specialists in helping people to do so. His link's in the description if you want to make his life hell by asking him to help you gain your OSC. But yes, basically, even at that point, you are still, we see people with OSCs who have been flying for years, who are highly competent, who have literally thousands of drone hours under their belts, and they would not be able to get a approval to fly over a crowd of 2,000 people. So you are talking so specialist, so niche. That I would love to hear a follow up one day, actually, if they do gain it and how they do it. Apart from the fact, of course, if unless that festival's indoors and there's no way of the drone escaping, but you've still then got all of the health and safety stuff and the insurance stuff to satisfy the.
Take the CAA out of the equation, then you've got to satisfy everybody
which
else.
can be just as difficult, frankly. Just as difficult. So hopefully that goes some way to giving you that one for. He's saying it's for a famous DJ. Well, it usually is. And actually that's one of the important things. Actually, I do have a video coming up on working with your drone, and one of the things I talk about is one of the things that I've had myself in my shortish time of commercial operations, and that is not getting too in love with the client, basically. Not sort of going too much down the rabbit hole. You're the professional, and you must hold the line in terms of regulation, because it's you that's going to end up in court for that drone flight. And I can guarantee you that famous DJ's solicitor will not be answering your calls when you're placed in cuffs for flying an FPV drone into a crowd of 2,000 people, basically. So hopefully that gives gives you my views on that, at least. So Will, what's up next?
Yeah, so we got a YouTube comment here from Phantom and the Drone. It said, how do you feel about the increase in CAA notification of jamming technology, a sign of things to come? ? Yeah,
this is an interesting one, actually. There is an increase in jamming technologies. There is an increase in the use of jamming technologies, and therefore the requirement to train people in the use of said jamming technologies. Now, yes, it is a sign of things to come. I don't necessarily have a huge problem with it, because they tend to be very isolated locations. They tend to be very narrow windows in terms of what days and hours they're going to be operating in, and very carefully put together. What's more interesting, actually, is that I think we may end up seeing a lot more. This is probably the way the UK and other countries are going to go in terms of protecting sensitive locations. So again, rather than necessarily having to throw up huge temporary restrictions, then actually they do have something where if there's a particular drone approaching that they're concerned about, that they can take that thing out with some jamming. Obviously, some of those jamming tests are also going to be for the military. They're also going to be for much larger operations, overseas, etc. But yes, I agree. There is probably going to be a lot more of it, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be a completely bad thing. I certainly don't think it's going to be anything that's going to be coming after us as a hobby or anything else like that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think if you look at what's happened in the Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, drones are seen and are being increasingly seen as potentially an asymmetric threat. So, you don't have to be a hugely wealthy organization to send a drone somewhere. So that is something that the country sees it has to defend itself against. So they will develop the technology whether we like it or not.
Yeah, exactly. And but actually, this is one of those technologies, a little bit like the Altitude Angel Project Skyway, where actually I think this particular part of the technology might actually be a benefit, basically, to us. Okay, one question here from Barclay. Barclay, hope you're well. 107 Drones, one of the lurkers. What does a person from the States need in order to fly legally in the UK? I hear you're going to get your 107 whilst in Tennessee. Yes, that's right. I'm coming across to the Minefield meetup, also Spin Up actually later in the year in Texas as well, which I'm really looking forward to. My first two large meetups in the States. But yes, whilst I'm in Tennessee, I will be sitting my Part 107. I've told everybody, so the pressure's on to see if I can actually pass it or not, frankly. But it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. But in terms of what you need the same as anybody else. So you need to have the appropriate level of registration through the DMARES, the Drone and Model Aircraft Registration Education Scheme. So that's either operator ID, flyer ID, or both. If it's sub 250, you only need the operator ID. Above, you need both of them. And also, of course, I would always recommend, especially if you're coming in from overseas, it doesn't hurt to have a bit of third-party liability insurance in there somewhere as well, basically. But you can check your travel insurance to see if it's covered and that type of thing. And of course, just have a good understanding of the drone code, basically, which is all on the same website, on the ca.co.uk registration site.
And load up drone assist when you get over here or before, so that you know whether or not the
yes, we have a pretty good, pretty reliable app here in the UK, which will give you anywhere from fantastic advice to fairly woolly advice. But certainly, if you followed it, you're not going to end up flying anywhere you shouldn't be. Yeah, exactly. Okay, what's next, Will?
Good stuff. CJ Drone Photography dropped a good one in the chat. He said, what's your thoughts on a reasonable time you should spend on visual line of sight whilst watching your console to get creamy smooth footage for a video you might be making? I've heard of buttery smooth, creamy smooth.
Could you repeat the question? Because I was actually just laughing at his thing saying, Sean loves to say frankly too. Yes, I do. It is one of my, yes, and rabbit holes.
They're doing a Geeksvana bingo in the
That's
chat.
Brilliant.
There, Sean.
We should actually have some Geeksvana bingo, actually.
What's your thoughts on a reasonable time you should spend on visual line of sight whilst watching your console to get creamy smooth footage for a video you might be making?
I think it's all about, for me, it's all about practice. It's all about muscle memory, and getting to the point where actually, once you've started the shot off and you can see it on screen, then looking back up at the drone and controlling the aircraft with the sticks, that actually it's where it's going to go. To me, that's the best way of doing it. So you don't have to keep looking down. And that comes from practice. That comes from muscle memory. That comes from, being able to look at this sort of, the periphery down at your screen, depending on how large your screen is as well. I also find not having the controller way down at waist level. I have seen some people flying and they have their hands, almost their arms almost fully extended down in front of their tummies. And to me, I personally like to fly much higher, even if it means a little lanyard to help keep it up there. Because actually then your periphery, you can actually see the shot you're getting as well, which is how I do it. But I always work on around about 60-40. Having your drone in line of sight doesn't mean you are looking at your drone the whole time. There are two different things. You must be able to see your drone in the sky in a way to avoid collisions with other aircraft and things on the ground, etc. But it doesn't mean to say you have to be looking at it, because, for instance, in the GVC training, you're very much taught to check the sectors of air for other aircraft all of the time. So actually, you should be looking away from your aircraft at certain points. But I tend to try and go for about 60-40. What would you say, Graham?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do an awful lot of video. I'm going to be doing some tomorrow with any luck, but I don't do an awful lot of video. And actually tomorrow I'll be cheating, because I'll have either a PO or a payload operator or a spotter with me. But yeah, 60-40 sounds about right, doesn't it? I think the key bits to get used to when you're practicing is the bit where you look down and look up again, because that's where it doesn't matter how small a twitch it is, it can show on the footage. So slow everything down, slow the stick gain and the EXP down on there. Stick it in cinema, whatever you can do to slow down the movements of the drone, so that if you do make a little nudge just as you're looking up and looking down, then that doesn't show as much on the footage. Yeah,
exactly. But again, I have to say, practice. And this is one of the reasons why I'm still a member of a BMFA club, and why I still fly my Mini 3 Pro all the way up through to my Inspires in that field, because I practice. I will, I'll have a fence post, or we have pillboxes and things as well. And I will have that item, and I will do an orbit, or I will do a pan shot, or I will do a reveal shot, and that type of thing. And practice practice, 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 especially if I'm going to go and do something. The other thing as well is that ratio should always change depending on the location. If you're in the middle of nowhere in an A3 and you're filming a nice farmer's house or something, and it's the only building around for miles to come, then I can sometimes stretch that a little bit more. But actually, of course, if I'm in a hot urban area, I'd much rather keep my eyes on the drone and have to take the flight 2 or 3 times to get the right shot than worry the other way around. But as John Coopy is saying in the chat, practice makes perfect. And I completely agree with that one. So hopefully that answers the question. Mike Jones, this is an interesting one. And I think it's actually on from another conversation, but I'm going to answer it anyway. Geeksvana, one of the questions was about line of sight and orientation. Why is that important? If the screen was to die, wouldn't return to home just kick in, especially on a DJI? Yes, but no, but yes, but no. Okay. So
not necessarily no. Depends on why the screen's gone.
there are several reasons why the screen going and that being the only way that you're watching your drone is just not a good idea on so many different levels in terms of you getting that drone back, in terms of safety. You do not know what is going on with that drone, and just hoping the thing reappears in the sky. You're as much of a passenger as the software is. Bear in mind the drone does not know where it's flying. So let's say you have a return to home of 40 feet or 40 meters, however you set it, then without the screen, without connection, yes, it's going to go up to those 40 meters and come back, but it may connect with anything within that flight going up in the air, may cause it to connect with something. You just don't know what's going on. If the screen's gone black because it's a bird strike, that type of thing, there could be all sorts of issues. If you can see the drone, and I'm not necessarily talking about actually keeping orientation, because that's the CAA guidance, whereas the legislation talks more about keeping the drone in line of sight so that you can avoid collisions. So for me, I do fly further than the CAA guidance of orientation, and I feel that I'm completely legal doing that. I just don't have the almost the preemption of the CAA saying Sean's flight is 100% legal. I don't have that coverage, as it were. But I don't mind about that, because I feel confident enough in my flying that the line of sight that I'm using is legal. And there is a video on Geeksvana about 4 or 5 of the recorded videos ago, which talks just about that, about flying further than the CAA's orientation and my guidance, my advice on that. So there's lots of things that can happen. So actually being able to see the drone and then being able to bring the drone down, because actually it might be safer to land the drone where it is and then go and retrieve it. And all of these things can be done a lot safer, in my opinion, if you can actually see the thing, basically, which is why, in my opinion, line of sight is actually important.
If you can't see it, the first thing to set in will generally be panic, depending on your experience. And the number of posts I've read over the years where people have had a drone which is returning to home. They don't know it's returning to home. They want it to, so they press return to home, and in so doing, they cancel return to home, and it just hovers there until the battery goes. Then they're on a hunt for the drone. If you can't see what the drone's doing, you don't know what the drone's doing. You only know what the system's telling you. If you got no screen, you know nothing.
Yeah, no, indeed. And you know, as Mike is saying, he will follow the rules. He was just understanding them, and he does understand me. He's just curious, which is great, Mike. And which is why it's a good, safe place to be able to answer these kind of questions. Everything I say is always guidance as well. You know, I give everybody the advice, the guidance in terms of what the regulations are. What they then do with that is completely up to them as well, of course. So I'm not trying to preach to anybody that you must do something or mustn't do other things. Basically, I'm very passionate about that.
And when Sean talks to hobbyists, I'll talk to specific category flyers and say, hey guys, you got to fly against the AMC, because that's what your PDRA 01 operation authorization says, which means you've got to follow that visual line of sight guidance to the letter in terms of
we live in a very strange regulatory space here with drones in the UK, where currently somebody with a sub 250 gram drone, or perhaps an A2 CFC in their Air 2S or something like that, someone flying in the open category basically has far more freedoms than someone that has been highly trained and has thousands of hours of experience.
And make you flying the same drone.
Indeed. It's a strange. Hopefully, the new the whole investigations and things that are coming might shed some balance on that, but we'll have to wait and see. I haven't heard Will's voice for a while. Are you okay, Will?
Yeah, you guys have been nattering away there.
Can we have the
Left me
next
out.
question, sir?
Yeah. Well, speaking of the specific category, we had Tony from Seagull Aerial Photo drop us an email. He said, "Hi guys, can I make a suggestion for the specific category broadcast? Something which I find quite confusing: the 50-meter bubble versus the 1-to-1 rule. Does the 1-to-1 kill off the 50-meter bubble?"
Right. Shall I? Okay. There is understandable confusion about this because last year there was an awful lot of rumours going around, and those rumours were not driven by the community. They were driven by information and emails coming out of the regulator. And there is all sorts of stuff on the bubble, and you're absolutely right. What we need to do is cover this properly in the very specific network, which people can join up and get information on specific category flying. One of the problems is there is a document, I will not bore you for long, called CAP 722H, which needs to be updated, apparently will be updated. I've seen a copy of the updated version, which I'm not allowed to tell you, and which I'm not allowed to see. And that corrects some of the errors in the risk assessment in there, which imply that the 1-to-1 rule applies to flights from uninvolved people as well as assemblies of people. It doesn't. So the 1-to-1 rule applies when you are 50 meters, between 50 meters and 120 meters away from an assembly of people. It doesn't apply when you are flying near individual uninvolved people or small groups of people who can move out of the way. They're not an assembly of people. So no, the 1-to-1 rule does not apply under a PDR A01 operational authorization for uninvolved people, only assemblies.
Very
of
well
people.
put. Very well. I think
it's
it's confusion that has come around, as you say, again, unfortunately, from the regulator, which is never fun. But also, I think it is specifically that kind of confusion has come around because the 1-to-1 rules kind of hasn't found its home yet, has it? It's sort of it's one of those things that was supposed to originally be open category, then it was kicked across to specific category, then it was over here, and now it's exactly as you've just explained. And actually, to me, that in itself is quite confusing. So I can see, Tony, why that was confusing, but hopefully Graham's I have to say, Graham, that was a fantastic answer for something that's actually quite complex.
Was it?
Yeah.
I thought I was lifting. I thought it was the one.
That was actually pretty impressive, frankly. The fact that I think that was very good. Okay, we're going to take one randomly from the chat. I have no idea what this is about. I saw council, but there we go. Steve Parks, aka Sparks. Hi, Steve. Thanks for joining us. Geeksvana. Warwick Council say because they are the landowner of all their land and they don't give you permission to fly on any of their land. What do you think? I thought the council land was public owned. Yeah, well, who owns the land, that type of thing, and who controls the land, who manages the land, that's always a technicality. In terms of the access, whether it's a publicly accessed land, this obviously is difficult, different in terms of England and Wales and Scotland. Scotland has different laws regarding trespass and rights to roam and all that kind of thing as well. But essentially, unless there is a bylaw in place stopping you from flying your drone, the only thing that can be done is that unless it's under a PSPO, is the council can tell you to stop flying, and then you really, you need to respect the landowner's request, the same as anything. If I came home and I found someone doing something on my front garden, perhaps my front garden is open, it isn't fenced in, but it's my land, and I came home and said, "Hey, would you mind stopping that?" I would expect that person to stop doing that. It's still a civil issue at that point. And yeah, it's something which I would personally continue doing unless there is a PSPO or a bylaw in place, and then unless someone specifically, an officer of the council, comes along and asks you to stop. Again, there is a video explaining this, which is, I think I actually call it the ultimate guide to councils or something of that nature, on the channel, which was about 4 or 5 videos ago. I think I will try and get Will to link that in the chat if he gets time. But yes, councils versus your drone. What powers do councils have to stop drone flight? And in that video, I actually have links, interviews with the CAA talking about it, and also with Daniel, the black belt barrister, giving his views on a couple of points around it as well. So it's actually quite a comprehensive video. It's doing quite well for us now, actually. After a slow start, but yes, but essentially it is policy. It isn't law, so it's basically the same as any landowner asking you to stop something. It's a civil matter.
They're helping to control their liability.
Yeah, exactly, and it's kind of like it's the same as okay, some councils will actually say our policy is no drones. But it's kind of the same as actually, if you try and get permission to do anything on council land from the council, it's very difficult to do. If you go and try and get written permission for them to allow you to walk your dog across a council park, you're just not going to get it, basically, because of liability. Well, what kind of dog is it, and how well trained is the dog, and do you have third party insurance, and yeah. It's one of those things that can become there we go, a rabbit hole. There you go, one of my favorite sayings. But it is essentially, unless there is something like a bylaw, unless there is something like a PSPO in place, it is council policy. It is not law. But I recommend going to watch that video. I think it's only about 15 minutes long, if you get time. There we go. I chose a question completely blindly, and it went okay. And actually, producer Will has linked that video. Thank you, Will, for doing that.
No worries.
Shall we have the next question?
Yeah, so we got one from Chris. He says, "Hi, Sean. Thanks for all the content you're doing. He loves watching your videos, and thought you may be the best."
How much did we pay him? Did we pay him for that comment?
That was
okay.
I can't disclose that, can I? Sorry. Yeah. I run a wedding photography business where I use a DJI Mini Pro 3 for certain shots. On another level, I'm also involved with a peregrine breeding project in Norfolk. The last few days, we've had several people flying drones near the nest site. I know you shouldn't fly close to nesting birds, especially a peregrine, as it's classed as a Schedule 1 bird. So my question is, how far away should you stay? Somebody told me you shouldn't get any closer than 300 meters. Yeah,
you've got things like the SSSI database here and that type of thing, and it really. My overall advice would be absolutely nowhere bloody near it. If you know it's in the nesting season and everything else like that, please respect these things as much as humanly possible. But for the official Geeksvana answer, here's Graham.
I mean, the law is really about peregrines. It's not about drones. You mustn't disturb them. So if people come along and if rangers, experts, whatever, come along and see a drone and believe that it's disturbing the bird and can grab some video that makes it look like it's disturbing the bird, then you could be in probably a lot more trouble than you would be for a minor breach of the drone laws. It's got to be said. In terms of distance, let's say, I don't think there is one, but I was asked to do a job in central London near the Palace of Westminster, and there was a peregrine falcon. If I remember rightly, it was nesting about 700 meters away in a complex city environment. So, chances of seeing the drone are reduced a bit, although I guess it is up in the air. And they were after a whole load of measures to ensure that the drone couldn't hurt the bird. That's the best part of a kilometre away.
Yeah, no, indeed, and because it's one of these things as well where people always want to talk about specific distances, don't they? About a lot of things to do with drone regulations and things. And actually, Article 241, we have to remember that. We also, as Graham said, you have to remember that there is a lot of legislation in this country that's nothing to do with drones that you could quite easily fall foul of as well. Foul of? No, okay. It's associated with your drone flight.
I'm going to be really clever in a moment. You wait for this.
But it is one of those things that you just have to be so careful of. There really isn't a set distance. It just you just have to be willing to stand up in court and say, I don't feel like I disturbed those peregrines. I don't think X, Y, Z, but just know that there's it's one of those. It's probably one of those how do I put this in the correct way? Just one of those laws, one of those parts of legislation that most people will be already against you when you're walking into that courtroom, frankly, because it's obviously, protecting rare and protected species is obviously something that's the top of our list, frankly, for most people.
By definition, by nominative determination, a peregrine is not going to hang around a particular way. It'll hang around a particular place, but it will wander, because peregrine is from peregrination, which means wanderer. Thank you.
Very good, sir.
Excellent. I think that was a great question, wasn't it? I think it's just
It's educational in so
Kind-
many ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, so
and it's quite interesting to hear like numbers being thrown around as well. Like you're saying, it's not necessarily, it's more just the concept of, well, hang on a minute, let's take a step back from that and what you're actually doing here. So yeah, fantastic. I mean,
yeah. Just before you
Um,
carry on, Mike Jones is asking
yeah.
if there's a countrywide bylaws database. For example, when he looked for byways in Conway, he found a very generic page. As a developer, he'd love to build something to help. The problem that you'll find with that is that even if there is a bylaw, it's then, is that bylaw enforceable? And also, is the definition of the flying object the bylaw talks about a quadcopter? Is it a drone, or is it actually a model aircraft? Because some of them will say ones that are charged via gas or petrol, or actually say model aircraft. That yeah, which doesn't mean it's a drone at all, basically. So and then there's also is it enforceable? Full stop. And there's so many complications to it that I actually think a database would almost be more harmful, frankly.
And if you're searching, don't just search on the word drone, search on the word model aircraft. And also be careful, because an awful lot of the older bylaws aren't typed in. They're not typed in a searchable manner. They are just scanned in. They are essentially photocopies, and they're not searchable. You have to find the bylaw and then read through it and find the definition within there. You won't be able to search for it in a lot of council databases.
No, indeed. And a bit of help from one of our professional operators within our group as well. Actually, it's Chris Crockford. Hi, Chris. Hope you're well. The Rebirds of Prey, you're liable to prosecution under the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981, but technically a triple SI has no airspace contingent associated with it. Exactly. Which is why you've got to be so careful, because it isn't something that you're going to have a TFR or a no-fly zone around. But you can access the triple SI maps. There's lots of information out there. They don't try and keep these things under wraps. You know, there's lots and lots of information. And often you will find a local number, a local email address that you can actually contact and talk to them and actually seek advice about the times of year and that type of thing. And hey, I'm flying here and this is my flight plan. Do you think that would cause any problems? And I've actually found those local organizations to be very, very useful, very, very helpful in the past.
Yeah, Magic Maps is a very good resource, because it will break down what the SSI is protecting.
Yes.
So you protect rocks, you're probably not going to disturb rocks with a drone, but if they're protecting rocks and some rare ground nesting birds, then you might have
exactly. Excellent. But thank you for that, Chris. Appreciate it. Next up, Will.
Yeah, we got one from Ian. Says, hi, Sean. Not sure how much clout you have with people behind Altitude Angels. This is referring to your recent video put out. But they're I'm doing the air quotes. New and improved app is even worse than the old one, he says. For instance, they've lumped controlled airspace and flight restriction zones into one category that cannot be separated, unlike before, which could cause problems. In many cases, I think it goes on to say there's quite a lot of information on the app now. But the app, he said, also could do with a simple legally you can't fly here kind of setting on there as well.
You can separate the CTR. If you go into it and click on advanced settings, there are some they've changed the format of the tiles. If you watch my video, which is the introductory video to the Drone Assist launch, it shows on there. But there are actually, if you press on where it shows prisons and controlled CTRs, etc., controlled areas, you can actually turn those off. So it will separate those completely for you and not have them on.
Can I just say, it might be worth going in, even if you've updated to get the updated version, maybe just going into the App Store and seeing if there's another update, because I think they're doing regular little tweaks to it.
It's a very good point. Very good point.
Yeah,
because it's also a very good point from the point of view that this is no longer going to be something which is never updated. Now that it's back under the control of Altitude Angel, now it's been re-released like this, there's going to be constant updates. And that's not really going to be helping you at all. But you can see the list here, and below is the list, and I can deselect. I've just deselected the control zones there, the CTRs there, prisons, and it's changing it actively on the map. So there's a little button here, and it changes it back to view basics. And it's the little selector tab to the right of the search button, and then you click on view advanced features, and that's how you turn that off. In terms of the woolly wording, that's actually something which they are directly working on. One of the things you have to bear in mind is that the Drone Assist app is kind of a hangover from the system that was built and created for NATS. It was then it remained completely undeveloped and with no updates whatsoever. And of course, we've now come into a new age of drone regulations, and the two don't match. So yes, on some of them, you'll click on it and say it could be prohibited or unadvised to fly within this area. It's like, and actually it needs to be one or the other. They do understand that. They are working on it at the moment closely. Yeah, it is something which they are working on. Hopefully that answers your question. Will?
Yeah, we got another one from a video here. This is from Fly Beyond CAA Limits Legally. John says, does this legislation make quick shots or active track illegal as your drone makes its own directional adjustments?
No, you've just got to be able to see which direction
and be able to take control of the drone. And
it's down to you to be able to see which way it's going.
Yeah.
That's the individual
no change. Yeah, absolutely no change. You are always responsible for the drone. And you know, as long as you can take responsibility for the drone. So if you're setting something going where you suddenly can't turn off the automation, then actually that wouldn't be correct. And in actual fact, interestingly, Skydio isn't officially available here in the UK. And I have direct messages from Skydio asking them why, because I wanted to try one. They basically said, actually, it's a regulation thing, and their beacon and that type of thing, because there technically wouldn't be a way to control it off the beacon. If you were flying it just by the beacon, that wouldn't actually stand up to UK regulations. So you must always be able to take control of it, which all software, all of the stuff, especially on the official apps, you can absolutely do that at all times by obviously pressing the sticks or pressing the stop button, etc., and taking control of it again, which is why it's important you can see it.
Perfect. Cool. We got another email in from Gavin here. He says, hi, Sean. Hope you're doing well. Wanted to get in touch as he's been keenly following your amazing and informative Geeksvana.
We're definitely
channel on
paying
YouTube.
these people.
Yeah, they're hitting us with some good one-liners here. But it goes on. Firstly, let me congratulate you on your excellent channel. This is great. I could just go off the. He loves the topics and he thinks they're well explained and debated. He wants to know, respectfully, if you have any recommendations of GVC and associated course providers. He's been looking at UAV Hub and HeliGuy as potentials, but he's in a bit of
which one to go for,
which way to go.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can see the full question here, and he's a former police officer and a current PPL holder who's looking to get into the commercial side of drones. I would say, and it's not just because Matt Williams is a senior editor here on the Geeksvana channel and a thoroughly great guy, but UAV Hub all the way. There is also, if you want to go different from that, there is, in terms of having a slightly different approach, there's also Osprey Training, who, again, a highly competent, highly professional company who have a slightly different approach to a lot of RAEs. But I know for a fact, with the amount of RAEs that I've spoken to, the amount of ones that I've spent time with, that those are two companies I can categorically tell you are absolutely fantastic training companies. And you'll actually leave not just having passed a training course, but you won't be one of those new GVC pilots that's then emailing me saying, how do I do this? How do I do that? Because you'll actually have an operations manual, etc., that you really truly understand, and one that you've prepared yourself, basically.
They are both all over the regs, and also we know they're both quite happy to question the regulator on the regulations where they see issues with them on an all too regular basis.
Yes.
I think I can say nothing other than I was trained by UAV Hub. So I mean, judge, take that what you will. That's just half their business overnight, isn't it?
Exactly. But both those two companies, just to give you a bit of a choice, as it were, so we're not just giving you one company. Osprey Training and UAV Hub, 110% behind both of those companies. Nothing against HeliGuide, just haven't much to do with their training side, and nothing against any other RAE out of there. But in terms of actually my recommendations, those are the two companies, 100%. And as Chris Lawrence is saying there, another vote for UAV Hub here too. Did my A2 CFC with them, was faultless, and that's one of the things with both of those companies is the whole control line of things. The whole experience is very, very consistent, basically. So
can I just add, I've got nothing against HeliGuide either. Again, don't know the drone training, but I have got an M30T on hire with them this weekend, and I promise to look after.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, if you need a drone short term, HeliGuide's a drone hire service is probably one of the most underrated, unknown sort of, almost little secrets. A lot of us pro guys do use it, but it is one of those things that a lot of people don't know about. It's so simple. It's very, very easy to use. You provide the insurance they need, and the deliveries turn up on time within hour slots and things with DPD and in proper cases that are sealed. And it's a very, very good service, I have to say, from the higher side.
And they work closely with Cover Drone as well, don't they, on insurance?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they sort of know each other. So
that's right. Yeah, it's a very, very good service from that side of things. So thank you for raising that, Graham, because it's an extremely good point, because it's also a very rare service in the UK at the moment, and some other hire services that I've looked at are just so overcomplicated. But HeliGuide is so big, and they've got their SHIT together, shall we say, so much that it's just so simple. It's like one form on their website, and then someone contacts you, and bang, the thing's in the post. It's very good.
Awesome. That was pretty comprehensive. I think covered a lot of good points there. We had Rob M come in. Hello, love your YouTube videos. I have a question. I have a DJI Mini 3 Pro. He's got the Flyer ID, operator ID, fully insured for using commercially to inspect roofs of clients and provide videos for properties for sale in the UK. He's a little lost. Can he fly his drone over a building, close to a building, to provide visual video and images of hard-to-reach areas for clients and for insurance companies to provide them evidence of damage or good condition?
I hope so.
Yeah, that's it. I was going to say, I know someone who's going to get in a lot of trouble if he can't do that. This guy here, highlighted on screen. Yes, go get him, CAA.
Moment of truth.
Yes, you can. Is the very short answer. Essentially, under the new regulations. Well, what was the gentleman's name that asked the question?
That was Rob.
Rob, essentially under the new, the current, I keep calling them new, but under the current UK drone regulations, it's more the flight and the flight that you're carrying out and the risk of that flight more than necessarily what you're doing it for. But yes, a Mini 2 with the correct commercial insurance, etc., or Mini 3 rather, sorry, you are 100% covered there. It's just about making sure the flight is safe, making sure you've got good separation from the building in terms of not, if a gust of wind isn't going to make you connect with it and that type of thing. But certainly in terms of the regs, it's a really good choice, isn't it, Graham?
It is. I mean, if there happens to be a skylight looking down on a shower room and there's somebody in there taking a shower, then you might be breaching privacy, particularly if you hang around that spot for any amount of time. But yeah, essentially you mustn't damage the property. Although with a 250-gram drone, it's not the property that's going to be damaged.
That's right, exactly. I'm not even going to take the bait and go down the whole thing of showers and skylights and that type of thing. Barclay, thank you. He's offered to let me fly his Skydio in Tennessee, although people letting other YouTubers fly their Skydios hasn't always worked out. Just ask Ken Heron. But yes, indeed. What's next, Will? Do we have another one?
Yeah, we got a good one here. So this is from Mark. It says, hi, Sean. First off, massive thank you for all the help and advice given on your channel. For what it's worth, I generally believe every UAS operator should watch and heed your advice. The reason he's contacted you is because he was during a drone flight on Monday. He'd originally thought that an air rifle was pointed at his Mini 2. He immediately pulled up and away from the area as quickly as possible. The air rifle, fortunately, turned out to be a high-powered pressure washer, which thankfully missed. Yeah. Upon returning home, he filed a report with the CAA and the next day contacted the company responsible's head office to make a complaint. The manager he spoke to was extremely apologetic and told him he'd spoken to the staff. The Mini 2 is his lifeline. He goes on to say it's really kind of helped him build up a business and build his confidence. But he just wants some advice on how would you handle a situation like this?
Okay. And again, I think I remember that email. He's talking about sort of regaining his confidence, isn't he? And sort of like being able to get back out there and fly again. And I think he's doing all the right things. And, you know, I don't think enough people report enough things that happen with their drones to the CAA in these terms, which will actually, if nothing else, you know, they're not going to suddenly get the police screaming around there, but actually being able to
build their awareness.
have them aware of what's going on in the real world and what's actually happening with pilots, especially with things like remote ID for the UK, not around the corner, but coming down the motorway towards us. I think it would be it's a really important thing to do. So first of all, well done for doing that, because not a lot of people do it. In terms of getting back out there, building your confidence, etc., I think it's a difficult thing, but I think you're doing what you can. And the only thing I would say is that in all of the many hours of flying that I have done, I have had very, very few issues of that type. Very few. And I'm talking about flying Mini 3s through to Inspires, through to FPV drones in town centres, in the middle of fields, all sorts of different types of flying with my drone. And actually that kind of issue is actually something which I would say is, in my experience, is relatively rare. Obviously, the more we put our drones around congested areas, the more we put our drones around people, and the more aware of them they come, then certain people are going to have certain feelings of negativity towards them. But yes, and the other thing I would say is that height is always your friend, from the point of view that once you're up there a bit, with the Mini 3 especially, once you're up at sort of, you know, even 20, 30 meters, you can't hear it anymore. So yeah, that would be the other thing. Height is your friend.
And a Karcher is not going to reach 30 meters.
Exactly. But I'm pleased to hear it was only a Karcher, and I'm pleased to hear it didn't actually cause any damage as well. One from the chat here. This is from Surly Dev. Hi, good to see you. Hope you're well. One of our regulars. Before the CAA guidance, a friend of my friend. A friend of my friend, okay, one of those, flew his drone about 1.5 kilometers out to sea. Argument was that he could see the surrounding area. He knew how high it was flying. Thoughts? Okay, it isn't that you can see the airspace. So if I flew my drone out and I can no longer see the drone, the fact that I can't see the airspace, the fact that I can still see the airspace and I could see if an aeroplane or a Virgin Galactic takeoff or whatever's going on in that airspace is happening, that isn't the law. The law is you must be able to see and alter your aircraft's position in the sky to avoid actually coming into conflict with anything in the air and on the ground, collisions basically. So you need to be able to see the actual drone. And so to me personally, that doesn't mean being a spec. It doesn't mean being out of sight, but I can still see the airspace. So what's the problem? I know the height, etc. There is just so much information that's happening with that out of sight drone that you are not within the regulations, certainly. Whether or not, I'm not preaching that I think what you're doing is a terrible thing and that you're risking X, Y, Z and blah, 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 blah. I'm just answering the specific question, as it were, that's put down there, that the argument that you're putting forward would not stand up in terms of legislation, in my opinion.
And if you want to look at the guidance, yes, the new guidance says orientation and you must see it, and it's very clear you must be able to see the drone. The previous guidance put a maximum limit in terms of guidance of 500 meters.
That's right.
So,
yes, so actually even under the previous one, it wouldn't have worked either.
Went further than that, yeah.
Yes, no, indeed, and it is, but it is. This is one of the age-old questions, and we shouldn't try to split hairs too much between what's in line of sight, what's out of line of sight, and that type of thing, because we're not the drone police as such, but certainly in terms of what would be legal or under legislation, you need to see that drone properly. Not in my opinion to be able to see the orientation for the legislation. Yes, the guidance, but not legislation. But you still need to be able to see it, and actually need to be able to see it, and therefore be able to see the things on the ground as well. So, and I know out to sea there's not much happening below you, but there could be ships and all sorts of, and again, I'm aware that there's lots and lots of, the risk, that the percentage chance of X, Y, and Z happening is remote, but we're just talking about legislation basically. Great. Do we have the next one?
Yeah, we got one from Matt here. He says, "Hello. Hope you don't mind me reaching out with a question."
Hi, Matt.
Exactly the same before.
Why didn't you just come on and ask us? Sorry, I interrupted you.
That's all good. All good. Yeah, he's fairly new, and he's just asking a beginner pilot. And as far as gear is concerned, this question is specific to the Emax Tiny Hawk 3. The piece of work, his place of work is situated in an airport in the UK, and he completely understands that he cannot fly outdoors in this location. But he has work in a decently sized hangar space building and would like to fly his tiny whoop around inside. It's completely enclosed with no danger of the drone accidentally ending up outside. He goes on to say, as far as he can tell, the CAA regulation doesn't extend to indoor flight, but he's just aware of things like radio transmission or video transmission, airspace. Yeah, just want some advice on flying indoors at an airport.
Apart from the fact that you'll probably have people still come and have a word with you and come and find where you are if you show up on whatever counter drone technology is being used. So it probably won't exclude from that kind of thing. So if you're right within the airport, then I would, even for something like a tiny whoop, it sounds ridiculous, but just in terms of protecting yourselves, do call the airport and let them know, basically. Call a low traffic number, and just let them know what you're doing and that you'll be flying, so that if it does come up on some radar somewhere, because some counter drone technology will say exactly what's being flown, others will just say it's a signal being emitted from over here, so they may have to send someone to go and check it out. But certainly the regulations, if the drone cannot escape, then you're not covered under CAA regulations. You're just, you are flying that thing around indoors, and absolutely fine to do that. But yes, but it must not be able to escape where you're flying from. So if it's a hangar, all doors closed. If it's a building, no windows open, that type of thing, a whoop could escape out of, etc. And because you're flying in an airport, I would go to the absolute ends of that definition. Personally, I would personally, I'd be duct taping the window shut to make sure no one can open a window.
And on the technical side, I remember seeing this question. I don't think you need to worry about interference with other systems. There are plenty of other things operating on exactly the same power. The Wi-Fi all over the airport will be operating on exactly the same sort of basis. So yeah, you'll
yes,
fine.
Exactly. Thank you for that one, Graham. Okay, there's one other one here in the chat, which is Drone Eye View. Good to see you. Orientation rule when it comes to a mini drone means we can fly further than like 70 meters, strictly speaking, question mark. Yeah, yes, if you follow the CAA guidance. This is the AMC acceptable means of compliance. So the acceptable means of compliance is a policy document put in place by the CAA, where they are telling you, if you want the presumption of flying within the law, then this is what you need to do. And yes, it says fly within orientation, which absolutely for a mini drone would be around 70 to 90 meters, depending on your eyesight. However, that is not the legislation. So strictly speaking, you can fly further than that, as long as you can still control the drone in the airspace and navigate and avoid collision with other aircraft in the air. Let's say other aircraft and things in the air. What other things would it be in the air? And also things on the ground as well. So it's very important to realise that. So it depends if you're going to follow the AMC guidance and be really, not over the top, but absolutely to the letter of the guidance, or if you're going to say, okay, I'm slightly more confident in what I'm doing and I'm going to fly to the legislation. And I would also say where you're flying might, and how many hours under your belt you've got, it could also change that as well. So if you're a brand new flyer flying in the middle of a city, I would possibly follow AMC just from the point of view that you're not going to get yourself into any kind of trouble. It's there to help you. If you're an extremely experienced flyer flying in a not so built up area, then perhaps you'll fly to the legislation. So it's one of those ones that you've got to take a personal choice on.
you know what? I've got 59-year-old eyes, which are pretty good on distance, but I flew at definitely over 120 meters away in central London with a Mini 3, and I knew the orientation. Reason was I was almost straight up. I wasn't quite vertical, but I was off at an angle. And when it's straight up, you're looking from underneath, you can see the orientation quite easily. You have to concentrate, but you can do that. So it depends on the angle of the drone.
Yeah, and there are things you can do. You know, people have put different coloured tapes on different arms and that type of thing, and very bright. There's a couple of wraps you can get which are very bright orange on one side, very bright yellow on the other. So if you see a bit of orange and yellow, you know it's the right hand side and the left hand side and things. So there are a few different things you can do there which can help. So. Okay, excellent. So, Mix 600, why does the CAA say you must use your eyes, but for aviation, must trust your instruments because the eyes lie? Yeah, it's an interesting one. And you know, eyes on is obviously always an aviation first as well. But yes, absolutely. When flying manned aviation, absolutely your instruments should be there because, as you say, the eyes lie, and certainly things like depth perception, what's going on, that type of thing. So no, you will hear no argument here. We are merely the messengers. So yes. Should we?
And I think there probably are situations in manned aviation where the eyes may well lie because they can't see anything. If you're in a cloud, you can't see anything. So what have you got? You've got to.
It's horses for courses as well, isn't it? It's horses for courses as well. It's a completely different form of aviation with different risk factors and everything else like that. So, should we have one final question?
Yeah, we got one here from Stephanie. He says he's just subscribed to the channel. Recently bought a drone, but before he had booked a trip with Wizz Air, and they don't allow a drone on board, which doesn't make any sense. Do you have any experience with them?
Okay, no, I don't have any experience with Wizz Air. Have you ever flown with Wizz Air, Graham?
I've not flown with Wizz Air.
Have you flown with Wizz Air, Will? Producer Will?
No, not recently. No,
I'm not actually sure which routes they fly. The overall advice I have regarding drones on planes is that it isn't as big a deal as it used to be. Most of the time you will find that airlines are pretty open to it, and they'll have a policy. So the best thing to do is literally just pick up the phone and speak to their customer services, and they'll probably email you a link to their policy page on their website, which will explain it all. Saying that they don't allow them is an interesting one, because I've not heard of an airline that doesn't allow them point blank. But it's all down to the size of battery and how many batteries and where you put those batteries, baggage or hold, and that type of thing. They don't like the things being together so that you can plug them in and start flying them around. So things like tape over the contacts of the battery and that type of thing is all good. But again, we're talking in the modern world with smart batteries and that type of things, GPS drones. So if you're going through customs, etc., with a Mini 2, you're going to find that they're pretty chilled out. They might be a little bit more sort of interested in things like battery packs with wires coming out of them for FPV home builds and that type of thing. So but it's always good to give them a call. They should give you a link to their policy, and it should these days be fairly straightforward. But the last few times I've flown with a drone on manned aviation, it's been pretty straightforward personally.
The only thing I've just quickly Googled, they've got a little FAQ. It says, "Can I take my drone / hoverboard with me?" Yeah, so that's what they categorize it as, and they just put no. Unfortunately, for safety reasons, you're not allowed.
So Wizz Air, do not. Can you send me that in the private chat?
Yeah, of course I can.
So Wizz Air do not allow you to. That's incredible. Which private chat are you sending it in, by the way?
I sent it on Discord. Sorry.
I mean, I guess if the answer you're getting from them is a firm no, then you've got to balance up to, risk and reward.
No, exactly.
You miss your holiday. So
I mean, you certainly can't say that you don't know. And I suppose if their policy is written like that, then I think, as you say, you're going to know, aren't you?
Yeah, if you scroll down to the bottom, that one.
So frequently asked questions. Can I take my drone hoverboard? Yeah, no, unfortunately for safety reasons, you're not allowed to take such devices neither on board nor as checked in baggage. That's incredible. That's
lumping drones and hoverboards together seems odd, and I wonder if that's
battery type.
a battery type thing, and they've just sort of mixed it up, and perhaps looking back a few years when some of the drone batteries were bigger and over 100 kilowatt hours.
And you may also find that that's to do with the fact that Wizz Air are obviously a much smaller airline, so their insurance probably has a lot more stipulations, and the hurdles they have to jump across to get insured and that type of thing may be greater. So you might find that, but thanks for finding that, Will. It's really interesting. But yeah, fly with someone else is obviously the answer there, because I know people like EasyJet, BA, others that I've flown recently with drones as large as an Inspire. They've gone through in their own little special cases without even batting an eyelid. So
there's nobody from Balpa here. You wait until the aircraft have no crew, so that you're not allowed to take drones on a drone.
Can I fly? Can I take my drone on a drone? Yes. That'll be the future answer when me and Graham are here being propped up in the care home with where it won't be us ending the show. It'll be our carers coming in saying, "Come on, time for bed, you two." Exactly. In which note, we will be wrapping up there. Other questions in the chat, I have seen them. We will add those to the next show, which will be in a few weeks' time. But thank you very much for joining us all this evening. It's been a lot of fun. Producer Will, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And for all your hard work. I really appreciate it. Good to see you in the chat as well. You're now a moderator in the chat. Ooh, which is very exciting. And Graham, please enjoy the rest of your holiday.
I will. Thank you, everybody. I've got hopefully quite a special flight tomorrow if the wind drops, and I'll hopefully make a video on that.
Yes, and particularly our channel members in the very specific network will be finding out hopefully some actual footage of that one, and on a bit of a how-to type of thing as well, which is very exciting, frankly. Yeah. But yeah, excellent. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time on Geeksvana Live. Bye bye.